Officially. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Off we go. We are officially at the halfway point. Well, at least I think on Sunday is officially the 45th day, but we are halfway through. It's hard to believe. We're sort of speeding through it, and it's been a very different but very good session so far. We've got a lot of bills in the Senate. I keep saying it. It continues to be true, and they keep coming. So I think we're at about 950 bills right now, which means March is going to be a long month. It means long days in March ahead. We have a lot backed up that needs consideration, and we were going to do the best we can to get through as much as we can, but we always have to approach it as a four-year term. Over the next 3 weeks, we will see the Senate committees be extremely busy with lots of hearings, and the pace and tempo on the floor will pick up as we get to the March 20th crossover deadline. On that said, today we have an important bill on the floor, which is the Clean Trucks Act of 2023. This is our President Pro Tem Malcolm Augustine's bill. As many folks know, transportation is the largest economic sector in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Trucks make up about 30% of emissions, even though they're only about 10% of the cars or vehicles on the road. And so what SB 224 deals with is adopts the California rule to gradually increase the number of zero-emission medium and heavy-duty fleet vehicles that must be manufactured starting with model year 2026. This is the end of the 2025 calendar year. The bill that hits the floor today was developed with industry and advocates together. It's a model of how we're going to have to approach these very challenging issues moving forward in order to decarbonize. It includes policy by adopting a new rule. It includes a study to make sure that we have the pieces of infrastructure for implementation, and adds an incentive that mirrors the Moore administration's priorities to account for the increased cost that comes with purchasing zero-emission trucks. We also came out of committee with a bipartisan vote, with Senator Simon Ayer voting in favor of it. Another important area that is worth mentioning is the budget requests. It has been an historic amount of requests that have come in, and I want to be very clear that we have to be very realistic about what resources we have available and how we must be fiscal stewards that are responsible with the state's dollars. We're going to have tough choices to make in the budget moving forward, so even though we've had a surplus, there are historic level of new requests coming in. And inflation has hit the state just as much as it has hit individual families. And so we have to make sure that we are funding our core services first. We have to make sure that we're funding everything that we need to have, and then secondarily what we would want to have. So it's going to be an important balance this year. We know that the Board of Revenue Estimates will be making new adjustments or announcements about revenue projections. We know that there's been a slight slowdown in the economy nationally. Maryland is not immune to that. And so we will see what the revenue estimates bring forth. What we know is that there are going to be very tough choices ahead. And I think it's important that as we move through this month with the budget, that we're very realistic about the balancing of interest that's going to be necessary. Finally, on the budget, I just want to make it very clear that this is a four-year term. We don't have to solve everything this year. And so as we approach the budget in the Senate, we will be thinking about it from a four-year perspective, that we are going to try and take a wider lens at how we can fund our priorities and make sure that we're financially sustainable, not just this year, but 4 years from now. Some good news. Yesterday, we saw Senate Bill 2, which had a hearing. This is the bill that deals with victims of SNAP and EBT card fraud. This is a really important bill that my office has fielded so many complaints from constituents of individuals who had their personal information stolen or abused in some way and lost their benefits. This is money that is putting food on the table for families, and Senate Bill 2 takes the right approach for trying to make them whole and deal with this unfortunate problem that consistently has not been solved. I do want to give credit to the new Department of Human Services Secretary Lopez. He's been working very hard on this issue, and I feel very confident that he is going to be working collaboratively with the legislature and, most importantly, with our constituents to make sure that their benefits can be restored. I want to applaud the governor for announcing and naming Lieutenant Colonel Roland Butler to be the new State Superintendent of State Police. This will be the first black male to serve as superintendent of the state police in the state's history, which I think is an important change. He comes up through the ranks. I think he's going to be an excellent leader for this for this force, for the state troopers, and look forward to his confirmation to officially move him forward in that way. We are still waiting for the new Secretary for Service and Civic Innovation, and we are hopeful that the governor will move as expeditiously as possible in naming this new secretary. It's an important position for a new department, and the legislature looks forward to working with whomever will be named to that role moving forward so that we can move this priority forward. Finally, I want to give a congratulations to Treasurer Davis on his reelection. It has truly been a pleasure to work with him. He understands the legislature, understands how to work with the legislature, and our continued partnership will certainly make sure that we continue to be great stewards for the state's treasury. And so with that, let me open up to questions.
To the opening of your statement, you started by talking about the pace of session picking up, and I know that there was a more of a deliberate effort this year in the House and the Senate to slow things down compared to what we've seen the last few years. Was this a little too slow? I mean, have you backloaded things so much that March and April will be in nightmarish?
Yeah, I mean, look, March is always tough in session, always. I think the difference is this was a transition year, so we have a new administration, a new government, a new AG, a new comptroller, new governor, lieutenant governor, and so naturally the switchover of the departments is going to slow the work a bit. We have a lot of new legislators in the House and the Senate, and so at the first year of a four-year term, particularly with a change in administration, it's always a bit slower. I think that this year we also saw a historic number of bill requests that came in later than they normally do. And so on the filing deadline day, we had about 300 bills introduced. And so just the sheer nature of that delayed introduction of bills means that they couldn't be scheduled. And so a lot of the big priority bills are backed up behind a number of other bills that will be heard in the first week of March. So I wouldn't say it's too slow, just by the sheer number of bill requests, it's a time crunch.
What do you think that portends then for all, you said historic number of late filed bills? I mean, can one infer that means that it's likely a lot of those late filed bills ultimately, even if they're good ideas, may not pass this year just because of the time crunch?
I think good bills won't get done. I think that's the case, and it's realistic. We're going to do the best we can. We are a part-time legislature under the state constitution. We have 90 days, sine die. If it's not passed, it's dead. And so, it doesn't mean we won't be back next year to take it up. And just like the budget for legislation, the same is true. We have a four-year term, and so, my job, our job as a legislature is to prioritize, and so that's what we'll be doing throughout March.
President Derek Davis earlier this week, standing next to you, by the way, offered to fix the 529 college plan, savings plan. Does the Senate have its eye on a solution?
Absolutely. I appreciate Treasurer Davis sort of filling the void of the vacuum that existed in the leadership around 529. We'd been having lots of conversations about the appropriate place for the 529 program to live moving forward and whether or not it makes sense to continue offering the prepaid program. I think we were about one of 10 states, only one of 10 states that still had a prepay plan in place. Moving forward, I think we're probably going to have to wind down that program because the other program that we have for the fund-managed 529 is incredibly important. So is the ABLE program for our developmentally disabled individuals, families that have children with developmental disabilities. This is a really crucial program, and too many Marylanders have lost their faith in its administration and operations. So I think moving it to the Treasurer's office is the right thing to do. We've been in consultation. We have a bill in drafting that will hopefully be able to be finalized here in the next few days.
So as a follow-up, you say a bill in drafting, that would move it over to the Treasurer's office, but does it allow him to do what he thinks needs to be done, or does it offer a solution?
Well, it also winds down the prepaid plan. We're going to have a lot of conversations on it throughout this legislative session. While we knew about it at the end of the interim, I don't think we knew the depth of the challenge. And when you go back to the 2019 legislative audits of the 529 plan, unfortunately, what we've seen is that a number of the issues that have arisen were forecasted by legislative auditors. And so we know that there has to be a significant change. And I'm glad that Treasurer Davis is willing to step into the gulf and take on what is going to be a big challenge of trying to fix a program that has lost its way.
What
Continue
feedback?
following up on that. Who would be the sponsor of that bill?
Working with Senator Klausmeyer and Senator Benson will probably be the lead sponsor of the bill in the Senate. And Senator Klausmeyer has been a champion of trying to work through and has the bill that's about kind of an ongoing council. So they'll be working very closely together to make sure that we get it through this year.
And finally, sorry, do you know, is there a demographic difference between who was taking advantage of the 529 plans versus the prepaid?
Between the two, I'm not aware of between the two. I do know overall with the 529 plan that there is a significant amount of work that has to be done to make sure that all communities are taking advantage of it. You know, we've thought of different innovative ways of, when we were talking about baby bonds, which is something that Senator Klausmeyer has been a champion of, starting with a 529 plan at birth. You know, I don't think that that's going to be something that we're going to be able to tackle this year, but it's something that I do think that we want to really consider about how to make sure we have a more equitable uptake and utilization of the 529 plan. Last year when we passed Maryland Corps, one of the additions that we added was that each successful participant in the Maryland Corps program would be granted a $6,000 stipend into a 529 plan. This is to bring non-traditional families or families who have not currently taken up this benefit and given them an easier uptake into it. I've also wanted to explore ways, and have talked to the comptroller about whether or not we can use an automatic 529 creation account for tax refunds, so that someone could opt in and you could automatically be enrolled for the tax refund, a portion of the tax refund to go into the 529 plan. Anything we can do to help people start thinking about it sooner. And look, frankly, as a parent myself, we didn't open ours until about a year and a half ago, which life happens, things are crazy, and then all of a sudden you look up and 10 years away, there's the potential for college costs. And so, and I have all that access to information out there. So, I know that it's difficult for families all over the place to prioritize. And so the easier we can make it, the better. And that's why I think Treasurer Davis will be the right person to help us expand access to the managed account 529 plan.
What feedback have you gotten on the appointment of the state police superintendent from stakeholders and legislators?
Overall, very positive. There's been a leader throughout his career, understands the challenge of the state police. There are a lot of big questions right now about the management of the agency and issues with hiring, retention, and recruitment. And I have a great deal of faith. We have wonderful state troopers, and I think from what I've heard informally, there's a lot of faith in Lieutenant Colonel Butler, and believe that he is the right person at the right time to take on a tough job.
Who has faith in him?
Well, right now I would say I have faith in him. We'll see through the administration's or through the confirmation process whether that's shared by my colleagues. I suspect it will be, but certainly the governor has faith in him as well because he's named to be the superintendent.
Yesterday, there was a small incident on the floor following the morning prayer. Has the Senate in any formal way heard anything from the school group that attended, or has your office in any way reached out and attempted to offer an apology or an explanation for the chastising that they took from Senator Kagan?
So I want anybody that is visiting the Senate to feel welcome, and I think that's a very important value for the state of Maryland and for the Senate of Maryland. I was unaware. I couldn't tell what was happening at the time, and because it was happening behind me. I have since had a conversation with the senator about how I didn't think it was appropriate, and I don't believe it'll happen again. At the end of the day, the Senate President is in charge of the decorum of the chamber, and I believe that we want people to feel welcome. What is the
rule for guests in the gallery who, for whatever reason, whether it is a personal or a religious or a physical inability to do so, to stand for the opening invocation? Are they required to stand? No one is required to stand in violation of sincerely held beliefs.
President Ferguson, the other day, the combined Republican caucuses expressed interest in executing question 1, the budget authority, in regard to the BOOST program. Do you care to comment on that? And are there other parts of the budget that you can foresee with the forthcoming BRE?
I think it's too early to say for sure. We're starting from the place of collaboration and partnership. And so we intend, and everything so far has indicated, all actions have shown from the administration that they want to work very closely with the legislature to make sure that the budget prepares us for this 4-year term. I would say we are absolutely willing to use question 1 if necessary, but don't have any strong desire or need to if not. We'd prefer to work in collaboration and coordination. And that's part of the beauty of question 1 is that it doesn't have to be used. It's better if we can work things out by sitting around a table and figuring out what is the best way to prioritize investments. In terms of the Boost program, this is something that it's an issue that I've struggled with personally a lot because I have a number of young people and families who are benefiting from the program in my own district and have very compelling stories about why their specific school is having such a positive impact on them. I also understand the value of public education and how critical it is. As I look at the budget, we have a record increase in public education this year. We are making significant investments to the tune of 12, 13% above what we spent last year. In the nearly $7.5 billion that we spend on public education, $10 million on the Boost program doesn't seem like a heck of a lot. So, I think there's reason to think that we can do both and not just either or.
Mr. President, I believe I saw this correctly on the agenda schedule, that the Baltimore Regional Governance Task Force bill got re-referred to committee, and I think the funding for full pre-K got re-referred. Are there issues with that?
Oh, they were in the Rules Committee. And so they were being sent to their they came in late, so they were being sent to their standing committee from the Rules Committee.
And a different topic here. Governor Moore signaled last week that he would support expanding an income tax break for the military veterans to include first responders, et cetera. Does it give the Senate pause or are you working on expanding it to include first responders with the budget projections in mind?
Look, I think when I go back to the importance of we're going to have to balance a lot of competing values in the budget this year, and we have to be very mindful not just of this year but for a 4-year term. I am so deeply thankful for our veterans, for our first responders, for our law enforcement, for our firefighters, for all who put their lives on the line so that we can be safe and live in community. That said, we also have to be able to fund government in order to work. And what we know is that our military veterans, our law enforcement officers, our firefighters are funded through those same very dollars that we would be providing tax benefits towards. And so we have to have a comprehensive approach to this. We have to be thoughtful about balancing the interests of individual professions versus the state budget as a whole. And so, I am going to urge caution, not because in any way that I think that veterans or firefighters or law enforcement officers are not worthy of the specific benefit. It's that we have to make sure that it is applied equally across all taxpayers, and that we have the resources to be able to invest in things that really matter, and that we can run and function with state government. So it's a tough conversation, but we've got to balance, and we've got to be fiscally prudent. We can't just say yes to everyone.
You said that there's been an historic amount of budget requests. Do you have the number?
Informally, it's not an official. I would say it's over $2 billion worth of requests that have come in of various causes and expansions and varying levels of desire. So it is always the case that there's an inexhaustible demand and a limited supply of what we can do with the state budget. This year it is exceedingly inexhaustible.
Earlier this week, Republicans expressed a desire to want to have a full-throated debate on the creation of the new Department of Service and Civic Innovation. You mentioned that typically that's done with a resolution that's put forward, and then the Senate, for example, would have a debate on that. Would writing, officially codifying that department into the law that was before E3 this week, essentially allow that debate to happen, and would that then negate the need to have the executive order that is before the General Assembly?
So interestingly, my understanding of the way that this works is that the executive order actually does become statute if not rejected in the first 50 days. So it would actually become statute, not just an executive order establishing it. However, in the committee, and very pleased that the governor presented on the bill. It's a priority of his and was there to answer questions. When Senator Washington asked him a question about the potential of codifying that language in the piece of legislation that's before us, there was certainly an openness from the governor directly, and the administration has expressed a willingness to do that as well. So I suspect that the bill will eventually incorporate the statutory provisions of the creation of this department alongside of how the department would oversee the service year program.
And would that negate at that point, negate the need for the executive order that could be withdrawn or?
It would supersede it upon passage. I don't think supersede is the right word, but it would preempt it. I think it would preempt it with if it passed through.
So is the lack of a secretary holding up funding or, I guess, support for the service cabinet position?
Right, I would say it is not. I think there's a lot of excitement about the possibility of this department and its activities. You know, the Maryland Corps bill was a bill that I had last year. It's a bill I've worked on since 2016. I deeply believe in the value of service and service being the thing that can help us rebuild the divides between communities. So I think that there is no doubt there is a desire to move forward with this. I think it is easier if there is a person that is the go-to person, a secretary that can be managing the negotiations and conversations and helping to build the picture of what the department ultimately looks like. You know, I know this will be a priority. The governor's deputy chief of staff has worked on service issues for many, many years, and I know is working very hard to recruit some of the best person possible to take on this role. The sooner we can get that done, the better, because I just think it makes it easier for everyone to help have a clear vision of how the program will function moving forward.
Just to follow up on that, at a certain point, right, and whether it's a date or a period of time, does it become a practical encumbrance to getting the program up and running?
Certainly, I would hope that all of the secretaries were named for the Senate to consider before the end of session. I think that's an important value that I imagine the Moore administration is trying to meet that expectation. But I would say from my perspective as the president of the Senate, it is essential that all of the secretaries be named and up for consideration for the Senate by the time we leave session.
Since we're at the halfway point, can you give us a status report on the governor's legislative agenda? Is all of it going to pass? Is it too early to predict any of that?
I think it's too early to predict. We're going to take it seriously. We want to work with the governor on all of the various ideas that have moved forward. I can't guarantee one way or the other if all will pass or not. A number of them still have to have hearings, and the first week of March, next week, will be, I think there are probably 5 or 6 bills on the agenda that are moving forward. When I talk about the backlog, some of the governor's bills are caught up in that deluge of 300 bills that were put in on that last day. And so just the sheer nature of scheduling, it's taken time to get them up on the calendar. And we'll work through as many as we can, and we want to make sure that the governor's successful, and I think that will be successful for Maryland.
There are a number of bills pending that have generated extended debate in years past. Are there any of them, perhaps like aid in dying or death with dignity, that you think are unlikely to come to the floor in the first year of a new term? I mean, everybody wants their bill that failed in the last term to come up and get passed in the first year of this term.
We are not going to be able to pass every bill that either could be passed or should be passed. It's a logistic impossibility. And so we're going to do the best that we can to prioritize the things that we know that we have the votes for, that we know that we can get through, and that don't back up additional bills. And so I expect extended debate on a number of bills that have not, in some cases, not had committee hearings yet. And so if they have to get through by March 20th, that gives us 26 days or so to move through on the floor. It's going to be a lot of, there's not a lot of time left for the most debated bills and issues. And so if we don't get to it, it's something, that's why we're back every 9 months.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Senator.
Hopefully the microphones work on the floor today.